Now I'm going to introduce our speakers for today. I know them as my colleagues at Community First who deal with our rural housing enablers project. But Trevor and Steve have got a lot of experience in the planning and housing sector, and I think housing is the particular direction that they're going to be looking to lead the discussion. But I'm sure if you've got general questions about planning, they'll certainly give you a view, even if they can't necessarily give you the specifics. But really, without any further ado, then I'm going to hand over, and I think we're going to start off with you, aren't we, Trevor?
That's fine. Yeah. Okay. Thanks very much, Ian, and thanks for this opportunity. It really is a good opportunity to talk to so many chairs about what is, I think, or I hope most of you will agree, is quite a big issue: housing and planning, especially at the moment. Just to say a bit about my background, I'm chair as part of being a rural housing enabler, as is in the intro. Steve and I are co-rural housing enablers under a DEFRA scheme. So it's government funded, run by Community First, and our job is to help villages as much as we can to deliver affordable housing. Well, that's on a one-year contract at the moment. We don't know whether it's going to be renewed, so I'll come back to that. But we're at the moment we're on course to the end of March. So you've got a couple of months to grab us if you want us. I'll come back to that. I also chair the Wiltshire Community Land Trust, which is an umbrella body, also aimed at helping parishes, but more on the sort of self-help approach, setting up community land trusts and so on. And we'll say something more about that. And also, I should say, I know time is short, so I'm going to keep this presentation very short. I'm going to spare you death by bullet points. I'm just going to talk a bit. What I will do, or can do, is offer a couple of sides of A4 to follow up this meeting, especially in the light of the questions that you have. We can prepare a paper which goes into a bit more detail of what we're about. Just a warning, I do have a cough and a cold, so I might have to go into mute if that happens. Yeah, so thanks for this opportunity. I'm going to talk about rural housing, the sort of the what and the why and the how and so on. I think many of you, well, all of you will probably know something about this. Some of you might know all of it, but I'm hoping that all of you won't know all of it. Otherwise, I shouldn't be speaking. I think the way it started from, if you like, the parish level or the village level, how does housing impact on you? I mean, I think there's one of several ways. One is it might be a developer actually looking around for a site on the edge of the village, nice big field perhaps where you could put up some houses in a nice environment, blah, blah, blah. And the first of you know it, there's a planning application going on the edge of your village. That's one way it happens. The other side, it may be coming from yourselves as a village, as a parish, that you want some housing, certainly to provide some affordable housing, for example, at a time when affordable housing is impossible for so many people. And that might be connected to the future of your village, to maintain the village shop, the post office, the pub, and so on, that you need to keep your village alive. That's an issue around sort of village sustainability. If you like. So it could be coming from different directions. Now, okay, how does the planning system work with all that? Well, this is a really fraught time, as you know. This government wants to build loads more houses, and many of us would agree there's a need for more housing. But it's also saying it's regarding planning as a bit of a block, and that we need to unblock the planning and let it rip, whether it's Heathrow Airport or houses. We're going to talk mainly about houses. Just to say, when you look at the planning system, the government is intending to change it and change it radically. Probably the biggest changes that since the 47 Town and Country Planning Act. having said that, we do have a system. It's likely to stay the same in the sense that it's plan-led, that there is a development plan, currently a local plan, the Wiltshire local plan, though it's a bit of an odd name because you can hardly call the whole of Wiltshire local, but that's another matter. Nevertheless, there is a development plan which sets the policies. Now, the peculiar thing about the English planning system, unlike most of the rest of the world, this is not a zoning system. So it doesn't mean that, because there's housing, it necessarily will, or if it doesn't say housing, it not necessarily will. There's flexibility. There are each application for planning is treated on its merits. That is the fundamental part of the British planning system, which means, which is great in one way. Flexibility is a good thing. Local circumstances, so on and so forth. But, and it's a big but, it also means some uncertainty for developers, uncertainty for communities, that planning could be changed. And we've seen that recently with developers challenging certainly greenfield sites by saying to Wiltshire, for example, well, you haven't got a 5-year supply of sites, therefore we're saying this site, this bit of field outside your village should go for housing because you haven't got the 5-year supply. And the so-called tilted balance, which is often quoted in appeals, planning on appeals, where the planning authority says no because it's not on the local plan. The developer says, well, hang on, you haven't got your 5-year supply. There's a case for this. And quite a lot of those applications have been succeeding. And certainly I would be concerned that given the government's concern, priority building more houses, that planning by appeal could get worse, could get more the case. But that's a big national regional issue so that's the sort of core of the planning system. The local plan, there's national policies, and there's something called the National Planning Policy Framework. That is changing. And there are housing targets, which I've said have increased. So it's all moving in certain directions. However, the local plan is still meant to be a basic policy in which planning decisions are made. And so the local plan, which Wiltshire has just submitted, but we know that it won't meet the housing targets that have just come in. There's a whole jiggery-pokery going on around that, which some of you may be aware of. So that's a bit up in the air. Nevertheless, the local plan will, amongst other, apart from setting overall targets, will set targets for your particular communities. You will be in there with, I don't know, 10, 20, 30 houses to be built over the next 30 years or so. So the local plan sets that theme. But you also, at a lower level, we have the opportunity to create neighbourhood plans, neighbourhood development plans, which as a community you can do, which has to fit in with the local plan, but puts in the detail and can set out the detail quite a bit. And certainly we would advise, if possible, doing neighbourhood plan. Not least, or most importantly, it sets out the future. What is the aim of your village? What does it need? Where do you want to go? Do you need to keep more people in, perhaps to maintain the services that I mentioned before? Where are the sites that might be possible? What are the big design constraints? A neighbourhood plan can set out your stall, which provides a good base for arguing and defending in planning. So that's what we would always say, good idea to prepare a neighbourhood plan. If you haven't done one, that doesn't mean to say you can't do anything. Far from it. Obviously, you need to check out what the Wiltshire local plan is doing. If you're addressing the issue of housing, then there's a couple of ways that can happen. One is, I've mentioned the developer might be building outside, on a field outside the village. Well, if that does get permission, and there may be good reasons why it should get permission, then there's the question of so much of that, a proportion of that will be affordable. In Wiltshire, it's either 30 or 40%, depending where you are. But that's a basis for negotiation. If you do, say, a housing needs survey, you can work out the profile of need for your village and say, look, Mr. Developer, we want at least 10 of those houses to be affordable for people who, can only afford a basic rent. We want some houses for those who want shared equity, maybe some to help downsizing, whatever, a profile of need, which you can argue with the developer, do a deal with the developer, if you like, as best you can. So there's that side of it. There's also, from your initiative, the other way of developing affordable housing, certainly, is the exception side. Now, this is a sort of Alice in Wonderland policy that's been going since the 1980s, actually, which says, there's a site that's outside the village boundary, and therefore doesn't have market housing value, wouldn't be sold normally for housing, but can be, as an exception, developed for affordable housing, and in perpetuity with a housing association, say 10 houses, possibly 1 or 2 for market to make it viable. But nevertheless, the focus is on just affordable housing, the needs for your village or community. And that's been going for 30, 40 years. There aren't a huge number, but that's a way to do it. The exception site policy, usually working with a so-called registered provider, a housing association. In Wiltshire, we're really lucky. We have White Horse Housing, who specialise in small village housing schemes. I say we're lucky because a lot of these have disappeared or have been, bought up by bigger housing associations. We're in a good position at the moment, and they're a very good housing association, and they are, they look very stable. They'll be with us, we hope, for the duration, so they can help with this exception side. Okay, so those are the things that you can do with help, and Steve and I are here to help with you. And I should say that, as I said, I'll certainly follow up this session, and after Q&A, you can get a feel for what the things you're interested in. I'll do some notes and prepare, a fact sheet or whatever that we can deliver to give you more information about that. What we can also offer is a visit. We can come and visit you in your parish and talk it through, which we always think is the most useful thing to do, to get to understand really what's going on there and how we can help. As I said, we're here until the end of March, so hurry. But we hope the funding will continue. We won't know for a week or two, actually, which is difficult, but that's the way government works. So we hope we will still be in business. But if you want to talk to us about a particular issue that you want to take forward, then we're here and available to do that, and we'd be delighted to come and visit you. To wrap up, I think the wrap up my session anyway. So far, I've sort of talked about how you negotiate with the planning system. You can also do it very much a do-it-yourself approach by setting up your own, taking control of the housing situation by setting up a community-led housing body, like a community land trust, which actually controls the site, the development, the whole thing, usually working with a housing association, usually on an exception site, although it could be with a developer as part of the developer's site. The important thing is that you have control as a community of what kind of housing and how much housing is developed. And again, we can help with that, and especially Steve, who I'm now going to hand over to, because he's done it. He's been there. He is the chair of SEEN Community Land Trust. They have successfully produced a 10 house development with passive housing, very sustainable in SEEN between Melksham and Devizes. But I'll say no more because I'm going to hand over to him. I just, referring to Ian, whether you want 5 minutes to sort of pick up any questions from what I've said in between talks, might be a good idea. Give people a chance to say something before we move into Steve's piece.
I'm, yeah, I'm conscious of time. I think if anybody did have a burning, if we were limited to one or two, Trevor, if anybody did have a burning observation to make, then now we'll try and handle that. But then I think we want to make sure we've got enough time for Steve. And the other thing is, managing this online is proving to be, well, not challenging, but if anybody has a question, either if we all speak at the same time, that's not going to work. So could you raise your hand? Oh, we've got a hand up, Sheila Glass.
I just wondered, I'm very interested in what you're saying about exception sites, but how does right to buy affect that? Would we end up achieving 4 or 5 affordable houses in the village, but only for whatever, is it 5 years? After you've lived in a house for 5 years, you've got a right to buy?
No, with an exception site, you don't have a right to buy. We're working with a housing association that is in perpetuity. And same with the Community Land Trust. That is rent in perpetuity.
Oh, brilliant.
Yeah,
that's interesting. Yeah. Thank you.
Another question from Tom Blandon.
Good afternoon. This is a weird one. My village of Charlton is a classed as a small village. Our parish clerk, since I've been on the parish, has always said, because we're a small parish, we do not have any requirement for any housing developments to take place. There has been no major expansion in the village because we're also a conservation area. So where does it come with if there's development outside of the village, outside that conservation area? How do we stop something like that, or how do we encourage it? That's where we don't get given any information. That's why we don't have an actual neighbourhood plan.
I think you've just answered your question. Actually, you need a neighbourhood plan, or at least a housing needs survey, because there may be need in your village. As far as the development goes outside, that's going to be a planning issue about whether that affects the conservation area and so on. So there'll be environmental issues around that, which obviously you will have consultation rights on that issue, and that'll be for the local planning authority to decide, of course. But you can have an input to that, and obviously that would include any evidence you have on housing need. You might not have any housing need, or a possible better way of doing it, an alternative site. The thing is to get stuck in with your arguments. Ideally, with a neighbourhood plan, then you've got a framework, a basis from which to make those arguments. But yeah, it really gets stuck in as best you can.
I'm just gonna say that, rolling on from that though. So we have a conservation area. Every time we have a planning application coming in for something with a property, they always say, well, it's part of the conservation area. We never get told what the stipulations of the restrictions of that conservation area is. That becomes a whole grey area of what we know, what we can and can't actually deal with. I think that's why we've never had a neighbourhood plan, because there's no guidelines on the conservation.
That should be clear. You should be able to get that from Wiltshire Planning Authority. It should be clear what the conservation area is and what you can and can't do. I'm surprised about that, but of course I can't really answer on a specific case.
Okay, thank you very much.
I'm going to take one more question before we go on to Steve's presentation. I know that Roger Evans has put his hand up, and we've also had a question in the chat, which I'll try my best to keep an eye on, because it might be that some of those can be picked up after the session. But yeah, if we have one more question from Steve Siddle at Holt, and then we'll move on to Steve for the second half of the presentation.
Yeah, it's not a question. We've just completed a rural exception site scheme, 10 houses. The key issue here is that the Wiltshire Council allocations policy does not cover houses under this scheme, and they are specifically built for the village. And we had a hell of a fight to stop the housing department allocating them to the whole of Wiltshire, which we won in the end. But the policy is still obscure and the housing department will not cooperate on this. We had to fight.
Yeah,
that's for information.
Yeah, and a worrying question, and we and Steve and I we're conscious of that, and something we will pick up with Wiltshire. Definitely, that shouldn't happen. That should not happen. The authority should help you with an exception site. It's for your village or possibly neighbouring villages, but certainly local. Yeah.
I'm happy to tell you our experience if that helps. Outside the meeting.
Okay, thank you.
Excellent. Roger, leave your hand up because you'll be the first person I come to after we've heard from Steve. Or if he answers your question, then take your hand down. But I'm now going to introduce Steve Vaux.
Thank you, Ian, and thank you, chairs, for attending this meeting. It's a great opportunity for us to talk to you. Just to be clear, we're involved in a rural housing area. So Trevor and I are concentrating on rural communities of less than 3,000, population 3,000. It doesn't mean that some of these policies don't apply to towns at all. Where I come from this, I'm not as highly qualified in the planning area as Trevor, but I'm been involved in a community land trust initiative in Swindon to build 10 homes. And I want to tell you how I did that. But first of all, what I want to say is that in our contact with parish councils, Trevor and I have discovered a range of issues. Some of these that you'll be aware of. One of them is that parish councils feel very much powerless in the planning arena. They feel they don't have power at all. The other aspect that we've discovered is that where development has taken place, and Holt is probably one of them, where development has taken place, it's very difficult for parish councils to control who the affordable element of the housing, the 40% that's delivered. It's very difficult for parish councils to control what happens to those houses after they're initially occupied. Do they get offered to local people first? Will they end up on the market if they're affordable for sale? These are issues which we're currently dealing with. Let me just go back now to the powerlessness, if you like, of parish councils. One way that you can improve your power is to have a neighbourhood plan and to keep it updated. And with a neighbourhood plan, you also need a rural housing needs survey. For anyone here who hasn't got a rural housing needs survey, and I can see there is a question in the chat, how do we carry out a housing needs survey? I have to say that Wiltshire Council has a 5-year rolling rural housing needs survey programme. That programme is currently suspended and has been suspended for some time. So any parish council that wants to initiate a rural housing needs survey, ask them now. It's housing enabling in Wiltshire Council. Ask them to get it going. The people in enabling are on your side, but the problem is the council is under-resourced. Apparently they have budget to take on a rural housing enabler in the next financial year, but it'll take time to recruit. Rural housing surveys are being done where the council is partnering with a developer. So if you have a developer who's pressing you for development in your village and you want to go there, Wiltshire Council will undertake a rural housing needs survey for you as part of a development partnership. So now let's go back to neighbourhood planning. I've said that neighbourhood planning is important. It's important that it's up to date. Already many of your made neighbourhood plans will be out of date, overtaken by the planning changes that are going through the system now, and also the new local development plan 2020 to 2038, which is currently waiting to go to inspection. I think it's been submitted, but there's been no observation on it yet. The new local development plan, Wiltshire Local Development Plan, has better policies in it for rural housing development. The other thing that comes across in our work with in the rural housing enabling areas, some parish councils don't want development at all. Some villages don't want development at all. Some do, they have a housing need. It doesn't matter which way you are, your plan should take care of that. All right, going on to scene, how did we do it? in Scene, we were doing a neighbourhood plan. And as part of that plan, we did a rural housing needs survey, and we realised that there was a housing need in the village. So what we did is ran in parallel with the neighbourhood plan working group. We ran a setup of a community land trust. Now, community land trust, I'll just stop here and tell you, if you want any information, go to our website. It's www.scenedclt.org. There's a page there with a reading list, and just about all the information you need on community-led rural housing can be found there. Your starting point is the Localism Act 2011. There is a plain English guide to the Localism Act 2011. You can find it on our website. That is the thing that empowers your community to take control of development, to influence how your community develops or doesn't develop, whichever way you like. So we set up a community land trust. We found a site. We had a benevolent farmer within the village. He offered us land at the right price. We set up a partnership with Wiltshire, with the White Horse Housing Association. And we had very, very good support from Wiltshire Council to be able to do this. The scheme is that the housing provider, White Horse Housing Association, bought the land. We built 10 passive homes. In other words, their total energy costs for the year are about £500 for a year. Very energy efficient. We then set up an arrangement, Section 106 agreement, and Holt should get this, an allocations policy as part of the Section 106 agreement. That allocations policy says that, and the Section 106 agreement says that those houses would remain affordable in perpetuity and be offered to the people of the parish first when they become vacant. That's carried out through an allocations policy which has a cascade system. Now in 2019, when we did our housing needs survey, and then in 2024, when we delivered the houses, the housing needs survey was completely different. You know, the picture was different. And some of our properties were allocated to nearby rural parishes, not offered to the rest of Wiltshire. We defined who they're offered to within the allocations policy. So the houses were built. The project was set up with really good, transparent public consultation. The parish bought into it. The people in the parish signed up to a community land trust. They all paid £1 each. That's the limit of their liability. And now those houses are affordable in perpetuity to the people of the parish. There are 3 shared ownership and 7 affordable rent. And the people that are living in them are very happy. And we can help you do that. That's how you gain power within the parish to control housing. We're not in the business of preventing housing. We're housing enablers. If you don't want housing, you need to write a neighbourhood plan that says that. I think I've come to the end of my time here, so I'm going to wrap up and hand back to Ian, and we're happy to take any questions.
Right then, Roger's been waiting very patiently. So Roger Evans, do you want to kick us off?
Yes, Ian. Good afternoon. Neighbourhood plan, you're sort of going on about you need one. Well, our parish has had a neighbourhood plan which was made a few years ago. It's still in place and is still made. We are in the process of reviewing it, but in the meantime, Wiltshire Council comes along with planning applications and overrules the neighbourhood plan because of the 5-year allocation. So therefore, you know, the parish council has got no say whether you've got a parish neighbourhood plan or not. And we're losing heart of doing a review. It's pointless if Wiltshire Council do not look at made neighbourhood plans. And that's a gripe I've got. Thank you.
Shall I answer that?
Yes, please.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you're quite right. The way the planning system is run at the moment, there are many communities that have had their neighbourhood plans overturned, and some of them have even been overturned by the inspector. This is something that we're lobbying for through the neighbourhood plan system and also through the community land trust network. it is disheartening, and it does undermine the Localism Act. But you do need. I'm not criticising the neighbourhood plan here, but I've read most of the neighbourhood plans in Wiltshire, believe it or not. Most of the made plans, they're online. Some of them are quite weak, and some are out of date. The legislation has changed. Neighbourhood planning system has changed. You have greater powers now, I believe, and if the neighbourhood plan is written to support housing, you've got to have a better chance of influencing, I believe. But I have sympathy with the view. I do, and I agree.
I'll just add to that, if I may. This comes back to the hierarchy, if you like: local plan, neighbourhood plan. Neighbourhood plans have to fit in with a local plan. Now, sometimes they will lose out, as you have in your case, but not always so. And there are lots of examples where neighbourhood plans have been held up on appeal. Actually, the inspectors come down on the side of the neighbourhood plan. So we're back into this, discretionary area, which is how the planning system works, which I say, as I said, is an advantage and a disadvantage, because nobody, you can't be quite sure. But it's all to play for, and you might, what's happening here is that because the whole planning system is certainly changing now, the local plan itself is being changed by national policies. So, Wiltshire has lost out on quite a few appeals because developers have said, oh, we haven't got a 5-year plan. Well, if the local plan's losing out, then obviously the neighbourhood plans may lose out as well. So there's a whole cascading going on, from national to local, and soon regional, by the way. That's another story. But so you have to see the thing as everything's on the move, changing, under pressure. But nevertheless, having a neighbourhood plan will give you a much better chance of getting what you want than if you didn't. But no, it's not set in stone any more than a local plan is. It's all up for argument, up for grabs, which is difficult, no question, and especially for parishes where you have limited resources, limited time, and all the rest of it. It is a big ask, but we would argue it's still worth doing. A neighbourhood plan, it doesn't have to be huge detail. You could be very focused on the things that you're really concerned about, maybe some particular sites or whatever. But we would agree it doesn't always work. It's not surefire. It's not guaranteed. You weren't guaranteed to win out. But that's the situation planning right across the board, I'm afraid.
I'm conscious we have got a few hands up. So what I think perhaps we'll do with the remaining questions, if Steve or Trevor, if you feel that it's a particular area of your specialism, then perhaps you come in, and then we can possibly just pick other themes up in the notes. But I'm going to go next to Sheila Glass, followed by Mary Riley, and then Steve Siddle. So Sheila, do you have a question?
Yes, first I'd just like to make a comment. It seems to me that for the next 6 months, given what I've heard in the news recently about planning, pretty well everything's up in the air. I don't know whether that's true, but I think there's going to be a lot of changes that we'll need to take on board. But what I wanted to ask Steve was, what sort of time commitment are we looking at if we did decide to set up a community land trust?
Yeah, I can answer that. We set ours up in, neighbourhood planning started in 2015. We incorporated the community interest company in 2018. We delivered the housing in 2024. So it took 7 years thereabouts to get it off the ground. But at that particular time, I mean, we were really the first in Wiltshire to do it. And that particular time, we had very good support from Wiltshire Council. Whereas we perhaps don't have that support now. What you do have at the moment is people like myself and Trevor who have the experience, and we have access to the resources. Also, we have access to a small amount of money as well to be able to do this. We can help with it. You just need just need to talk to us, really.
I'm rather looking at more the time commitment from my parish council, from councillors. Would I be looking at, I seem to spend most of my life doing parish council stuff now. I just don't know how much time would be involved in terms of time commitment.
Yeah, the key to that is to find evangelists within your community who really love your community, who want to see housing get done. It's a big ask for a parish council to do it. In fact, it's slightly restrictive on parish councils. If you have a separate group that can run out of, as we did, our neighbourhood planning group, one or two of us split off from the neighbourhood planning group and we set up a community-led housing group. But we ran in parallel with the neighbourhood plan, and we got the neighbourhood plan to write policies that favoured community-led housing. Now, a parish council doesn't really have the time to do that. You've got to run the parish. You really need a separate housing group, but you need parish council members on that group.
I'm sorry, I'm taking a lot of time, but I'm concerned that the planning gain for the person, you said you had a nice farmer who let you have the land. Was that at commercial price, or was that, I mean, we've got about 3 landowners around here. If I was to approach them, am I going to say, I'm going to give you a nice little windfall here, or was the land transferred at more or less agricultural prices?
Yeah, I can answer that. In this particular case, the land was sold to the registered housing provider on the proviso that a basic plot would be set back for a member of the landowner's family who happened to live in the village and was in housing need. In other words, we provided a self-build plot as part of the scheme.
Right.
That's how it happened.
But you actually sold it for agricultural value.
No, I can tell you, under the National Planning Policy Framework changes, the Labour government is suggesting benchmark land values. The benchmark land values that we're using at the moment are between £10,000 and £15,000 per housing plot. That's the figure. If look at the plot, look at the number of houses you can put on it, multiply it by 15,000. That's where you should be offering. But farmers, being farmers, will always come back and try and chip you away and ask you to pay for legal fees here or survey fees there. There will be other peripherals with it. But that's the benchmark land value that the government is offering at the moment.
There's a lot less than commercial.
It is indeed.
Right. I'm going to wrap this up. Well, wrap this question up. And Mary, you've been waiting patiently. Do you want to ask your question?
Yes, thank you very much. First of all, I cannot thank Trevor and Steve enough. They came to our parish, Landford Parish, and they were absolutely, it was more than helpful to all concerned. And sadly, we've had to stop the group going forward with affordable housing due to many hiccups, mostly on the back of hiccups from Wiltshire. But I would say Wiltshire carried out a housing needs survey a good number of years ago. The community partnership in the village then carried one out to show a need also. And then we formed our own and distributed our own housing needs service, so it's more than viable to do that. It is a lot of time when I go into time from a parish council. I'm chair of the parish council and I also chaired the affordable housing group, so there was much time involved. But it was brilliant because we had equal number of parish councillors, no more than 3-4, and the same of people in the community, that there was an equal voice all round. The difficulty that we had in Landford is that Wiltshire is the housing authority and we're right on the border, and the New Forest National Park is the planning authority. The New Forest National Park on an exception site were absolutely phenomenally good, and if only Wiltshire could take a leaf out of a page of their book and look at it, it would definitely happen. But the problem that you have is you have some people who've been in a village, for example, for a long time, and they create this feeling of animosity towards affordable housing that some people are then apprehensive when we're actually quantifying and assessing the need, they're apprehensive to come forward because they don't want people pointing a finger at them saying, those houses are here because of you. So there's a lot more to it than actually the planning and everything else. It's getting that community buy-in. Hopefully in the future, we will go ahead, for example, with the Community Land Trust. But I would say at the very onset, Steve and Trevor, it was phenomenally good, the insight and the help. And they did come to parish and speak to the community. First class.
Thank you.
Excellent. Thanks very much for that. Steve, did you have a question?
No.
That was me, I think, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was Steve. Sorry, yes, Steve Siddle. Yeah, sorry.
Another, it's an observation from experience, recent experience. We have a made neighbourhood plan. We've built the developments in that plan. The Wiltshire core plan is considered out of date. Our neighbourhood plan is considered out of date. The local plan, which isn't made, is considered to carry little weight. We have a speculative, unplanned development outside the village boundary of 90 houses, approved by the planning inspector on the basis of housing land supply. We now have another one which is about to go to the Strategic Planning Committee. And if you read Wiltshire Council's briefing note 2420, you'll find that the housing land supply figure is now 2. Because of the allocation that the new government has placed on Wiltshire. And I understand that that Wiltshire Council are not even supporting appeals now. They're just letting them go through because they don't stand a chance. So really, it's not a bright vision for anyone. There's companies like Gladman and there's, I think it's Glassbook or somebody else, are going around saying to farmers, we'll do the work at risk, all of it, and take part of the profit when you sell the land. And that's what we're all facing. There's 84% uplift in Wiltshire's allocation by the latest MPPF and Angela Rayner. So sorry, it's a bleak view, but the only other thing I'd say, having handled these 2 enormous applications and the amount of bump you get, that we've just found out that using AI, ChatGPT, you can put all these documents in and ask it to make a case, and it comes back with one in instantly, and it's a very good case. That's a tip.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I think that's a session for another time. That is. Sounds fascinating. I don't know whether Steve or Trevor, you had any comment you wanted to make quickly on any of that, or are you happy for us to just move on?
Just a quick one. Yeah. Well, firstly, to thank Mary and say, look, I hope the situation does change because in Landford, I mean, it is promising that the new Forest Planning Authority is so positive, and I hope at some point, that can change the local view, and we're certainly here to help, and help support that if whatever we can. Steve's view from Holt, yeah, that is depressing. That is kind of almost the worst case, really picking up this point about big housing targets, and it's something that will be a national issue. Actually, I think there's going to be a lot of reaction to it, because in a way what the government is doing is making planning by appeal worse, or it's just steamrolling. And will it deliver more affordable housing? I mean, I'm putting my sort of national planning hat on here, and I certainly feel very opposed to a lot of the planning policies that are coming forward, because they're not thought through, especially for rural areas, in terms of what is needed for local communities and how this housing is going to be related to transport access, schools, education, the whole infrastructure. And I'm horrified by the way that the policy seems to be delivered, build houses. But what about where should they go? Where should they go is absolutely critical. And good planning is about planning them in the right place for all those facilities. So I'll get off my soapbox now, but I am concerned about that, and I think that's going to be a battle over the next few years.
I'm going to take a question from Paul Stevens, and then I think hopefully we'll have enough time just to sort of throw it open, just in case anybody had anything that wasn't planning related. But Paul, you've waited patiently, so have you got one final question on the planning side of things?
Yes, we're in our village here at Cheverell Magna. Next Tuesday, we're having a village meeting to start the process of seeing if we can do a neighbourhood plan. Is it worth doing now, or is it worth hanging on until all the new rules and regs come out from Labour?
Most of these neighbourhood plans.
Well, I'll kick off, and I'm sure Steve will come in. I get on with it. You know, it does take time and it does take effort. Get your team together and make a start. You know, the planning situation, yes, are going to change, but there won't be one point where everything will be clear. You know, I think that things will be rolling changes, and there are going to be a lot of changes. But I think you have to fight your corner, and with Wiltshire, and I hope that, and we're certainly will be talking to Wiltshire about how we can best manage this, if you like, within the new planning regime. But I don't think it's all over yet. I think there will be, you know, alarms and excursions, and I would say make a start, see what you want, get your case together, and take it from there. But Steve may have other things to add.
Yeah, I support get it done. You have the power. Look at the Localism Act 2011. Pick up the Plain English Guide. You will see that empowers your community to take control of development. You could use community right to build orders, the whole range of tools that have not been fully exploited by parishes. Wiltshire Council looks favourably on community right to build orders. The planning department says we should be getting more of them. But if you don't have a neighbourhood plan, you'll have development done to you, particularly in this climate.
Thanks for that, Steve, and thanks, Trevor. And on the subject of planning, just in case anybody does have any other questions, obviously you've all got my contact details. So if you have any questions, I know I'm conscious of time, or even anything that occurs to you after this session, then please email me.